Are you ready, Kristen? No. All right, as many of you know, I attended the General Synod of the United Church of Christ, June 30th through July 4th. And General Synod has taken place every 2 years until now. The delegation gathered, voted by one vote. I mean, we even had to do a recount. Voted by one vote that we would make the shift to meet every 3 years instead of 2. General Synod takes a great deal of time and financial resources while serving a small fraction of our overall membership. The United Church of Christ is one of the smaller mainline denominations, though our impact is large. The delegation decided that to be good stewards of resources, we needed to make the shift to every 3 years, beginning in 2028. We are also mindful that the General Synod speaks to the local church, not for the local church. The work that happens at the General Synod is extremely important for dictating missional goals and outreach for the denomination. However, the focus can become only on a fraction of individuals who are able to attend. It's then pivotal for those of us who do attend to bring the information back to all of you, to pique your interest, to report it out, and to let you know what is going on at the wider church. It is also living out our commitment to covenant, the promise to be a relationship with the larger church. There were 736 delegates and over 1,000 visitors that attended this event. There is a great deal of networking, talking, connecting, an extrovert's dream, and yet this extrovert found themselves pretty tired by the end of the day. Each member of our conference delegation was assigned to a committee that would become an expert on the resolution before the entire body. We caucused with the Northern Plains Conference, which is South Dakota, North Dakota, and I believe Nebraska, 2 times during our 5-day meeting, beginning at 6:30 a.m. to discuss resolutions before the body, get our bearings on our surroundings, and to get to know each other as colleagues in the Minnesota Conference. Now, for those of you who enjoy the resolution process, I invite you to check out ucc.org and the General Synod highlights. There were 14 resolutions. The resolution I worked on was entitled A Resolution to Study and Develop Reparations Proposals for African Americans. And this is a similar discussion that is being had at the House of Representatives. And so this called us to talk about the study. What does it look like if this were to come into place? And when it was brought to the floor of the Synod, it passed 609 yes to 18 no. A few others that were covered, a few other resolutions that were covered were closing the digital divide, calling on the United Church of Christ to seek digital justice and inclusion, which passed 623 to no, to the number of 12 who said no. And what that encompassed was how we make sure that all areas of our country have access to internet, how our rural communities have access to internet. And then another resolution affirming Guns to Gardens and other gun violence prevention ministries. It passed 644 to 5 who said no. Actively affirming the human dignity of transgender and non-binary persons. 629 said yes. No, 10 said no. Denouncing the Dobbs decision and proclaiming abortion as health care. 611 yes to 24 no. And then one that got the most lively discussion on the floor of the General Synod was encouraging a plant-based life. And that actually did not pass. It was 218 yes to 392 no. And the reason that resolution did not pass was that it needed to be written a little differently with some more information for clarification. The other aspect to General Synod that is always a highlight for me is the beauty of the stage and worship. Converting a convention center into a worship space is no easy task. The space is vast and cavernous, and yet the planners of this General Synod took this space using the theme from Isaiah 43:18 through 19, making all things new, and created a space that highlighted the beauty of nature and light. A background with a tree radiating light and vegetation with broad leaves and blossoms outlined the stage, and scattered throughout, peeking behind rocks or standing at attention, were ceramic animals that included a rabbit, a turtle, a hedgehog, a fox, and more. These animals were placed in different spots at each plenary, and it became an I Spy moment that drew one into the liturgical landscape. From the sites of General Synod came the sounds of wonderful music, challenging preaching, engaging debate, and a vigorous resolution process. This synod will be remembered for electing Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson as the first woman and first Black woman to lead the denomination as General Minister and President. This synod will also be remembered for a powerful conversation with Ibram X. Kendi and how to continue anti-racism work as individuals and institutions. We also heard a great keynote from the Reverend Nadia Boltzweber. General Synod has been coined a small town that stretches from coast to coast, reconnecting with old friends and colleagues and making new ones is a gift of these 5 days. I give thanks for being a part of a savvy Minnesota delegation of 15 individuals filled with spirit and grace, and for this congregation willing to lean into its covenantal promises and allow me to attend. Nothing beats the excitement of coming home. How then does this relate to hearing a psalm about being searched and known and a parable about weeds and wheat by Jesus? One of the aspects of General Synod that always impacts me is to hear personal testimony. During the floor debate on the resolutions, one resolution entitled Actively Affirming the Human Dignity of Transgender and Non-Binary Persons, a young adult came to the microphone and shared that they were trans and that they needed the United Church of Christ more than ever to be a safe space and a sanctuary space for trans and non-binary persons, as well as our LGBTQ siblings. Due to the legislation that is being passed, there are individuals who are being targeted for being less than, and now more than ever, the UCC is needed. We know that we have been created in the image of God, and that when we sit down and when we rise up, God is there to discern our thoughts from far away, that God is there in our searching and in our knowing, and how wonderful we are surely made. We also know that despite all efforts to separate weeds from wheat, there are times when we just need to let them grow together and see what happens. This is completely countercultural to this farmer who would like to pick out all my weeds from my garden. And yet there are times when I too notice that things grow in ways I've never imagined, even amongst the weeds. The UCC, the denomination that I dearly love, recognizes our differences and recognizes the ways in which we gather together as the people of God, holding covenant with each other and honoring who we are and whose we are. You and I both know it is not easy to sit together with all our differences and all our different theologies. What we do know, however, is that we are beautifully made and that God sees us and loves us for who we are, and that we can gather together in fields of wheat and weeds to do the work of loving our neighbor, to express kindness, to show justice, and to walk humbly with our God. Thank you, my friends, for allowing me the time away to see the larger church at work, so when I come back here sharing my lofty ideals, you know that there are others doing the same. We are not alone in this process. We are not alone in this work that God has called us to do. A process and a work that tries to share a way in which we can make all things new and to be a seed of hope in a world desperately in